Leg 5 of the ocean race. You could almost be forgiven for missing it, because while it was 3,300 miles from Newport in the States to Aarhus in Denmark, for the three front runners it took just 7 days. I'll say that again, just 7 days. They were so quick they almost beat the arrivals party. 11th hour racing led the way into the Atlantic, where the fastest route to the other side depended on hitching a ride with a weather system. The American boat got onto it, as did Holcim and Militia, but Biotherm missed the ride and paid the price, as they lost touch with the front runners. 4 days into the leg, and 11th hour racing were the first to break the ocean race 24-hour record with 611.9 nautical miles. But they suffered a drama too, hitting something at speed and injuring 2 of their crew. Miraculously, the boat remained intact. Then Holcim bettered not just this, but the outright 24-hour distance record for monohulls, with a run of 640.9 nautical miles. This was no mean feat. The previous record holder was the 100-foot supermaxi Comanche at 618 miles back in 2015. Almost a day later, just as everyone was thinking that was it, Militia pushed the bar even higher, just at 641.13 nautical miles. The weird thing was, they weren't expecting it either. Meanwhile, 11th hour racing was still leading and continued to do so all the way to the finish here in Aarhus. It was an impressive performance for Charlie Enright's crew. 2 consecutive wins now puts him in the lead overall, but by just 1 point over Holcim. Militia is still in contention too, just 4 points off the lead.
Couldn't have imagined a better outcome, honestly. We positioned the boat well, we sailed the boat fast, we didn't have any technical issues, kind of knew when we needed to push and when we needed to preserve, and just a really good victory for the team, top to bottom. I mean, we didn't open the tool bag. You know what that says about the tech team and everything that they put into the prep in Newport and stuff like that? I mean, just awesome team win, for sure.
Yeah, there were some pretty tough conditions. Like, we actually got more north in this leg than we got south in the Southern Ocean. So, yeah, getting around the top of the UK, around the Orkneys, was some pretty strong conditions, pretty nasty sea state, a lot of wind, and yeah, a fleet that was pushing really hard to try and try and get around there first. So there wasn't much in the south. Everything was a bit more spread out, and you had weeks and weeks for things to shake out. And in this instance, we had a couple of days, and you had to push because otherwise someone was going to get past you. So yeah, it meant being a bit more aggressive, taking a bit more risk, and yeah, working pretty hard to make sure we'll stay together.
Biotherm had a torrid time on this leg. After missing the ride on a weather system, they then broke a shroud and had to nurse their boat to Denmark. But that's not the end of the story, at least not at the moment. The big debate right now is who holds the record. The World Sailing Speed Record Council rules say that a new record needs to be at least 1 nautical mile better than previous. Militia's was just 0.23 nautical miles further. So what happens? Do you give it to Holcim, or the one with the highest distance? Or perhaps you give it to the boat that broke the previous record most recently? Or do you call it a draw? We don't know yet, and we're waiting to hear from the Speed Record Council. But it's an interesting one. Meanwhile, if you've still yet to catch up with the race, here's a summary that we ran in the magazine show On Course about the 2 previous legs and why they were special. As the Ocean Race fleet made its way up to the Northern Hemisphere on leg 4 from Itajaí to Newport, the points board was shaken up as the runaway leader Holcim PRB was dismasted shortly after the start. It was a devastating blow for Kevin Escoffier's team. Having got back to shore and put their 60 on a ship, the race for them was now to get the boat and a new rig to Newport in time for the start of leg 5. Before the crisis struck, they'd won 19 out of 20 possible points and were clearly in front. Now the challenge was to see whether that margin was sufficient to keep them in the running. Then, as the remaining fleet got within a few hundred miles of the finish, news came that Goya Environment had also been dismasted. All the crew was safe, but this was a massive blow to a team that had been forced to retire from leg 3 with structural problems. The 5-strong fleet was now down to 3. As the fleet found itself squeezed between a serious 50-knot weather system and the chaotic sea state of the Gulf Stream, life got pretty hard. All 3 teams were paranoid about making it to the finish without breaking their boats. Before that, things had been far more settled and had provided time to reflect on the various performances within the fleet. Leading the charge north 11th hour racing team had found their form on this leg, but Malizia had found theirs too and were close on their heels. Seeing the German flagged boat performing so well in lighter conditions was not what many had expected. Since leaving Alicante, the competition has been surprisingly close for a fleet of custom IMOCAs. Few were expecting that either. And in this respect, the monster leg 3 through the Southern Ocean had raised eyebrows for over 30 days. A few weeks ago, I was contemplating this leg as I sat at the bottom of the world. Well, Invercargill, the southernmost city in New Zealand's South Island. And out there lies the Southern Ocean. Nothing, once you're past Stewart Island anyway, between us and the Antarctic. It's also the racetrack for the Ocean Race. Leg 3, the longest in the race and the longest in the history of the race, just under 13,000 miles. Now, of course, when you compare this leg to, say, the Vendée Globe, which is non-stop around the world, you may ask why such a fuss is being made over a leg that is 13,000 miles long. Well, there are several good reasons. Yes, these are IMOCA boats. They were designed to sail around the world, but apart from one of them, they're all new generation boats. They're faster, they're unknown in that respect, they foil, they're heavier, which means the loads are much greater. They're heavier because they have a full crew on board, and that full crew can push these boats harder than ever before. So there's a lot of unknowns and consequently quite a lot of trepidation around this leg. In fact, Charles Caudrelier, who won the last race on Dong Fong, said that when he'd spoken to the skippers, he said that a number of the skippers had plenty of people that wanted to be interviewed to do the race, they just didn't want to do this leg.
But when it came to it, the Southern Ocean section didn't deliver the infamous sleigh ride conditions, at least not on the scale that we're used to hearing about. It did, however, provide some key moments. First, the news that Goya Environment was returning to Cape Town after discovering structural problems with their hull. Then Malizia reported damage to the top of the mast. Incredibly, they managed to repair it at sea and press on. Holcim PRB's 600-mile jump on the fleet was pretty impressive too, as was the way that the fleet reeled the lead back in. Next came the record breaking. 11th hour racing started the bidding with just over 544 miles in 24 hours, an improvement of 5 miles over the previous best for an IMOCA. But overnight that was smashed by all 4 boats, each one raising the bar. Eventually the top dog performance went to Holcim PRB, clocking up 588.71 miles. One of the pre-race questions had now been answered. IMOCAs are indeed quicker with a full crew. As always, rounding Cape Horn was a milestone for all. Team Malizia were first.
It's just here. We just passed the Cape Horn. First place in the Ocean Race, 23. We have 20 miles. We're 20 miles ahead of Holcim. Here on board Malizia Sea Explorer. I'm tremendously proud of the team. all the supporters, the partners, big thanks to all the fans and followers. And it's just a feeling like Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve in one.
Valencia first at Cape Horn!
Yay!
But then came the biggest battering for the fleet, with 50 knots and steep seas. Aboard Biotherm, all their instruments had gone down, making life seriously difficult for the crew. Then, in the closing stages of the leg, they hit something in the water and broke a foil, forcing them to limp to the finish. 11th Hour Racing had had their share of problems too, including a torn mainsail, damaged rudders and a crack in the bow. Nevertheless, they managed to finish just ahead of Biotherm, in third. But the Leg 3 victory went to Boris Herrmann's team Militia, beating PRB to the end of this epic leg.
Happy for you guys.
It feels unreal. I mean, we have been a month at sea, a little bit longer even, and through so many challenges and ups and downs, and now we are winning this. So I still need to process that to realize. And then we get such a nice welcome here. So many people come out in the middle of the night.
Meanwhile, in Leg 4, 11th Hour Racing were both over the moon and relieved at winning this one and arriving victorious in their home port. The Militia crew were delighted at having delivered another podium position, and Biotherm pleased that they'd made it intact. The irony is that while Leg 3 was the one that teams feared the most, it was Leg 4 from Brazil to Newport that did the most damage.